Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay. Never comes again, another day like yesterday. Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay.
Good morning, everybody. It has been a hot minute since I've done an episode, and I don't have a clear idea today, but I'm going to jump in and make sure that I do one just to get back in form and to get back on the horse. And so I was thinking about, I always have a few topics sitting around, and often the topics that I think of, I'll think back and realize, oh, this sort of relates to a prior episode that I did. And one of the earliest episodes I did, which I'm going to riff off of now, was one in which I made the statement that humans have a very stubborn and pretty unconscious propensity to believe that in a situation where there's something that could directly negatively impact them out of a complex situation, they have this very stubborn insistence that once they've thought it through, that the cause of the thing, A, must be simple and singular and understandable, and B, must be something within their control. And you can see why we would want to believe this, right? But in reality, there are many, many, many times that the cause is not singular or simple, right? The cause can be a symphony of stimuli or environmental factors or whatever that augment one another, that add up on one another and become, create this outcome, this negative outcome, whether it's health or learning or money or whatever it is. And often we absolutely insist that the cause must be knowable, right? Simple and knowable. We just don't like the possibility that sometimes there's multiple sorts of bits of information involved in the cause that is simply not in our scientific knowledge. It's not in our awareness yet. And the reason we don't like this is because what that means is, well, I don't have a chance to control for the outcome. I don't have a chance to understand it. I don't have a chance to control it. Sometimes we know what the cause is, and the cause will be outside of our control, and then we'll insist on believing that the primary cause is something that is within our control, even though it's blindingly obvious that it isn't. The example that I used was in education. The US, for a first world, extremely wealthy country that puts tons of time and energy into research and pedagogy and curriculum, doesn't do that well lined up against other countries. And so we have lots of dialogues about what that is. And in this example, I noted that 9 times out of 10, what people do is they end up blaming teachers and going, well, we need to train teachers and we need to do this, we need to do that, and we need to have more tests, et cetera, because these are all mechanisms that are well within our political and financial control. You can't control for what a community is and how academically oriented it is, or whether it's financially so distressed that parents are not thinking about scientific experiments and they're not buying a telescope for their child and going out in the night to look at the sky and talk about star constellation. Like, they're not doing those things, and that could be a primary cause. In one of the in one of the studies that I participated in, they were interviewing students about how many books were in their home. And there was a pretty clear correlation between students' ability to read and the number of books and or magazines that were present in the home, and seeing parents do the act of reading. But of course, it would be political suicide for a politician to go after parents and be like, well, your children are not doing well because you don't own books and you don't read. Well, that person is going to lose votes. There's going to be outrage. So instead they go back to the teachers. Like, what do we need to do? Why is that? Well, because teachers have no choice. They're on the hook. They can the district can go, well, you're going to get more training and you need to do this and you need to do that. And they can put the pressure on students and be like, we need to do more standardized testing. When in fact, there's a primary cause or there's a symphony of causes of poor student outcomes. So that's just one example. So anyway, I don't mean to redo that episode, but the reason I'm thinking it through is because I see this same thing in American society a lot. And I see it a lot in therapy. So I'll give you an example of this exact same principle playing out. I'll have a client who, and I'm not referring to anybody specifically, I'm talking about across the past 12, 13 years that I've been a therapist. I'm just sort of putting together an amalgamation of sorts of things that you see happening, right? Someone will come in and they had a very, very difficult childhood. They had a parent who was very negative, very depressed, was very negative towards them, constantly put everything down that they did. Anything they did, the parent would predict terrible negative outcomes, would make identity accusations. Well, you're not good at that. You're not the kind of person who can do that. Maybe somebody else could do that, but you shouldn't, right? So you have this, like anybody who knows psychology knows that kind of parenting results in an extremely limited, emotionally and psychologically paralyzed person whose nervous system collapses into depression over and over and over, because as biological beings, we're naturally made to express, to pursue, to risk, to push against the world, to build, to make changes to our environment. We're made to do that. And if you suppress and paralyze the nervous system, it'll try and it'll hit that psychological belief limit over and over and over until it finally collapses. When it collapses, we experience that as depression, right? So there's a primary cause. And then that person will come in and now they're 38 and they married someone who was like their parent, who's kind of negative and depressed and limiting and controlling. And this person will come in, and if you let them, they'll spend 6 months or a year or 2 years talking about the supplements they take, talking about needing to take up yoga again, talking about going to the doctor, talking about, God forbid, don't get me on a soapbox, fucking SSRIs as a solution. And they can be, if you have suicidal ideation or anxiety and it's unbearable. That's what psychotropic medication is for. I'm not against it, but does it drive me fucking batshit crazy, people's insistence that that's the primary solution when they have these ragingly obvious causes in their life, right? So here's this example, right? This person struggles with on and off pretty severe depressive episodes that last for 3, 6 months, a year, and then they'll fight out of it and sort of dissociate a little bit and just get really muscular about exercising and whatever, and they'll sort of ignore the stuff that's going on, and they'll ignore what they grew up in, and they'll ignore how they were programmed, and they'll just fight, and through pure discipline they'll feel a little bit better, and that'll be okay for 6 months or a year, and then they'll get tired and they'll let off again, and boom, they're off into another depression. But there's this blindingly obvious cause. The psychological profile and the very consistent experiences you experienced as a child, if it was overwhelmingly limited or abusive or negative or dismissive, you got programmed with an internal limit that constantly wears out your nervous system and wears down your nervous system, and until your nervous system will fight back by this frantic kind of anxiety trying to fight through the limit, or it'll periodically collapse, or you'll have both. And you may have complex PTSD, constant fight or flight activation, depending on how severe the parenting was, right? This is stuff that sometimes it takes you 6 months, a year, 2 years to introduce that truth to a client. Meanwhile, you try to support them and be supportive and kind and help them problem solve and help them think through and talk through supplements, even though you're not a doctor and you're not going to advise them to do anything, right? And take up that yoga class, and yeah, that's great. And they feel good because their therapist said, that's great, you should do it. And they feel a little bit better for a while. And you'll sort of participate in this, which is not bad to do. You're trying to support and make space for this person. But part of you is just raging of like, if you could just stop for a second and let me tell you, you have these super obvious causes that you have to deal with. And if you don't deal with them, you're just going to be playing a game. You're just going to be negotiating with a cause. You're going to be negotiating with the symptoms of a cause that you refuse to look at. Right? And so there's an example of, well, that's complex, right? Part of the reason people don't want to look at that is A, they've been programmed by society, never look back, don't blame your parents, don't sit there and revisit your childhood. You're just going to get depressed. All therapists just want you to sit there and obsess about your parents and beat up on your parents and blame you. But no, that's bullshit. No, we don't. No, we fucking don't. We want you to deal with the cause and the fact that that cause built in a belief system that's in you now. Forget your parents. I don't have an opinion about your parents. They're not my clients, right? You need to deal with the fact that this was internalized and it's now part of you. And if you have to revisit how your parents treated you to realize, oh my God, that really happened, then we need to do that. But it's not about your parents. It's not about obsessing or blaming or just sitting there going, oh, poor me for the next 15 years, right? It's about acknowledging, oh, there's this very complex cause that has a number of complex ways of interacting with it to try to heal it and to move on so that you can live your life free of that, right? So it's complex and the solutions are complex and it takes work and it's painful and uncomfortable. So people are like, well, what supplements can I take? And can I go to the gym? And can I take an SSRI? Sure. Exercise is way more effective than an SSRI. But again, if you feel suicidal ideation, take it. That's what it's for. It's for those cases. But there's almost not a single pharmaceutical solution that's a long-term maintenance solution. They're all short-term because you're introducing a chemical into your brain and your brain upregulates and downregulates. No matter what anyone tells you, your brain upregulates and downregulates to reestablish its baseline. So like Big Pharma has lied their asses off to you and acted like SSRIs are maintenance. You can, if you find one that works, you can take it for 15, 20 years, you need to be on this for the rest of your life. It's bullshit. Your brain is going to adapt to that and it's going to become less effective, which is why psychiatrists and doctors will move you off of that like 5 years in and they'll go, well, we need to try this other one. There's this new thing. They're not doing it just to be jackasses. It's because there's a tendency for the brain to upregulate and downregulate. What that means is if you introduce what to the brain is an unnatural amount of a neurotransmitter caused by this pharmaceutical, your brain will reduce the number of receptors that can interact with it. This is the process of addiction. This is a process of habituation. If you take heroin, the number of opioid receptors that you have in your brain and your body significantly reduce because your brain and your body, your nervous system is trying to reestablish your baseline. And it's going, well, if I have a flood of opioids, which is not natural to me, it might feel great, but the brain and the nervous system is like, oh, no, we're supposed to feel this other way that I'm used to, that's normal, and it reduces the number of receptors. And what that means is the next time you take the opioid, you're going to have to significantly increase the amount because now you have fewer receptors that are going to interact with that. And if that continues, if you're a user for 5, 10 years, a regular user of something, you start destroying your brain's ability to interact with that. Now, as an aside, I'll tell you, and I'll get back to the main point, what's really sad about that is that that's why overdoses happen, especially with opioids, where the body downregulates, reduces the number of receptors pretty quickly. is because someone will be an opioid addict and they've downregulated. So let's say this is your opioid. You have all of these receptors and you've been taking opioids and your brain takes away one, takes another one. Pretty soon, right, you have a significantly reduced number of receptors. And then, so you've downregulated, and then you go into sober living and you go into program and you're serious about it this time, and you're going to get sober. You don't want to do this. And slowly your brain will upregulate and go, oh, well, now we don't have enough opioid interaction. So your brain will start increasing the number of receptors available to interact with those opioids. Okay. And then what happens is people lose their shit. They're an addict. They want to use again. And they'll go out and they'll buy the amount of heroin that didn't kill them when they only had one receptor or a reduced number of receptors, but their brain upregulated while they were in sober living. Now they have all these receptors. They take the same amount that they were taking when they only had one, but now they have so many receptors that opioid goes in, completely suppresses all their nervous system, suppresses even the nerves that keep the lungs going, and they stop breathing and they die. This is why so many ODs happen after someone has gone through a program. Because when they relapse and they fall off the wagon, their brain is upregulated while they were sober and increase the number of receptors that can interact with that chemical. Well, the same thing happens with SSRIs. The same thing definitely happens with anxiolytics, with medications that doctors give you, which are benzos, which are very dangerous. Benzos and alcohol are the two chemicals that you can have a seizure and die of if you go cold turkey. It's like Big Pharma's not telling you this shit. Even doctors are not telling you this shit when they give you your benzo to help you sleep. And they're also not telling you that benzo messes with your sleep architecture, so it might allow you to fall asleep, but you're not getting restorative sleep, so you're still waking up tired. They're not telling you this shit because they want you to believe that the answer is as simple as a singular chemical that goes in and interacts with a singular receptor that messes with a singular neurotransmitter. And as American society, we're obsessed with the idea that the solution will be some singular thing that you can buy and just put in your mouth. Stop it, man. Stop it. Knock it off. This is just some stupid bullshit. Every single time you assess a challenging situation in your life, you need to consider the possibility that it's way more complex than a chemical. And that the people selling you a singular answer to your problem that can be packaged and sold to you and taken with a syringe or popped in a pill are full of shit. They're making billions upon billions upon billions of dollars off of lying to you, and they know they're lying. They have scientists. They have doctors on staff. I knew a scientist who worked for one of these companies who constantly struggled because he or she was an ethical human and constantly struggled and couldn't tell me because they were working at a very high level at a pharma company, and right, they can't disclose what's going on, blah, blah, blah. But I know in the background, they knew that this was some bullshit and they were helping that company sell a fucking lie. And by the way, it's become well known now that this particular company is scandalous as shit. Like, they're just liars. They just sell shit that's not good for you and make hundreds of millions, billions of dollars off of it. Okay, enough with my outrage. So this person who comes in who's depressed, it's like, well, there is a clear cause. The solutions are maybe not totally in your control, and they're complex and they're difficult and they're going to take work and they're going to take struggle and they're going to take self-examination, and it's maybe going to be expensive. Like you can't just pop a pill. You got to go talk to a therapist or talk to your clergy or talk to your uncle, your wise, like whatever. Like it's not about therapy. It doesn't have to be therapy, but you're going to have to go to work and figure this shit out, right? And so, and there's a point that I want to make out of this because I'm kind of recapping and re-exploring that idea that, right, that humans have. But I want to tell you something that happens especially in American culture. Let's simplify American history. There were terrible things that happened. This country was born out of terrible things. It was born out of a massive genocide of the native peoples were here. And it was born out of slavery. I mean, that was like the first 200 or 300 years. And we're only, I don't know, 400, like however many years. Like, it's wild, right? But then World War II happened, and we became the most powerful and wealthy and militarily powerful entity that ever existed on the face of the planet. And what that means is, everybody and their uncle in the culture, but also outside the culture, every country on the face of the planet is going to start trying to manipulate the politics. They're going to start trying to manipulate the financial status. They're going to start trying to manipulate the population. They're going to start viewing the United States as this cash cow, but they're also going to start viewing it as this threat that has this immense power, and they're going to try to manipulate to either get on the right side of the country, or they're going to manipulate to try to weaken the country so that it's not a threat to them. But all of these things have been going on since World War II, since this became an incredibly powerful country. And I see Americans struggle because there's two things that happen. One, you can go into denial because you don't want to really deal with how overwhelming and complex and the thousands upon thousands upon thousands of directions from which every bit of information, all the advertising, all the TV programming, all the media programming, all the messages, all the political messages, all of the political fights, all of the word blah, 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 all of it has been gamed because it's about money and power and control. And you've been sitting here, we've been sitting here all sincere and believing and loving our country and loving our fellow human, our fellow citizens, and wanting to do good and being told by our government that our country does good. And we went into Iraq to liberate those poor Iraqi people, even though we slaughtered 1 million of them. And we went into Afghanistan to liberate women and to get bin Laden, like all of this shit, like on and all of these reasons. And if you're paying attention, it's always about oil or control or natural resources or some super powerful business that was like, I need access to this, or this isn't, like, whatever. Not since World War I have we entered a war because we gave a shit about people. Not one. Okay, so all of this is going on, and you, the American people, we can go into denial, or what I've been experiencing over the past 15 or 20 years, especially since I had kids. Let's go to the food industry. My grandfather was a farmer, and I remember what tomatoes taste like, and I remember what onions taste like, and I remember what watermelons taste like, and I remember what bread tastes like, and I remember what my body felt like eating them. I remember what pears tasted like coming from the Columbia River Gorge, right? Picked off of a tree. I remember. And when you go to Vaughn's or Ralph's or anything, even sometimes you go to the farmer's market, that is not what it is. And so I've spent the last 15 years, but especially intensely since my daughter was born 7 years ago, and then my son, researching. What do you do? And you spend all this money on organic food and, oh yeah, but that company says they're organic, but they're not really because blah, blah, blah. You need to do some more research. Where is it coming from? How do you do this? Well, you need to find small local family farms. Okay, you need to do that, but are they lying about, do they use pesticides just because it's eat it, like blah, blah, blah. Where do you get your milk from? That's been gamed. Peanut butter, it's like, oh, if it's not organic, then the problem with peanuts is not that they're unhealthy, but they're really dangerous fungi that grow on it. Same thing with coffee, blah, blah, blah. Okay, this is just food, and I've just named a couple of things, right? I was raised to believe that orange juice was a super healthy, blah, blah, blah. What it really comes down to is forget about if orange juice isn't orange juice. Right? Forget about that. There's people adulterating it and doing things to it and using chemicals to process it and to preserve it. We all know that's not good for you, right? Forget it. Just blending up orange juice and releasing oranges and apples, all of these things have been altered by humans to have a much higher sugar content because it tastes good and it sells better. So fruit has way more sugar in it now than it did 50 years ago or 100 years ago. But also B, when you blend it up, you're breaking up all the fiber and releasing all the sugar so that when you take a drink of orange juice, it's practically the same thing as taking a drink of a soda, of a Coke, which is incredibly unhealthy for you. This massive spike. And I was raised to believe that one of the healthiest things you could do was to have a glass of orange juice for breakfast. I mean, they were always pitching sugar for breakfast. And it's a lie. It was a lie then. It's been historically documented that the sugar industry bribed the FDA and put out propaganda to set up fat as the problem because they didn't want people to stop buying sugar and to stop buying cheap, simple carbohydrates. Okay, so to come back to the point, just deal with food. The amount of researching and energy and time that you spend. I remember when my daughter came, I spent months because my wife had difficulty sustaining milk and breastfeeding the kids. She did as much as she could, but we had to supplement, right, with formula. I spent months and months and months searching and researching, and all the American stuff has seed oils and sugar. All of it. We ended up going and buying in bulk at 2 to 3 times the cost from Germany because you could read a list of 3 ingredients from a tightly controlled system that just doesn't allow them to poison their own food. And we would order a big ass box and have it shipped and get it. And then sometimes they would run out, the supplier wouldn't have any, and you would have to find some other supplier who had gotten it and it hadn't been sitting in a warehouse for 2 years because they bought it, blah, 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 and was actually do you get what I'm saying? Okay, you have these experiences. You're just trying to get normal food. You're just trying to get normal food. And so what do? Well, a lot of people, we're lucky that we could afford to do that. I'm lucky that I had the kind of job that I had the time to do that, even though I was tiring and stressed me out and I had no time for myself and I could barely exercise and blah, blah, blah. But there are people who can't even dream of doing that, let alone afford it. What are they supposed to do? Sit there and agonize every single day that they are giving formula to their baby that has sugar in it and no, they're just going to hope that it's okay. They're going to go into denial and go, well, I think it's probably okay. Those people doing that are just crazy, hypersensitive. They're full of crap. And they're going to convince themselves of something because who can do that? Sit there and feed poison to their kids. What are they going to do? Okay, I'm coming to a point, right? There's more of this. Let's say I've talked before about preschool, daycare, preschool, and right? Forget about the conversation about elementary, middle school, and high school. Forget about it, right? Let's just start with daycare and preschool. The data is blindingly obvious. It is not good to remove a baby from their mother and from their family at 6 months or at 1 year. It's not good. I saw this heartbreaking video the other day of a young mother driving and sobbing, and you could see that she was emotionally broken because she had just dropped off her 4-month-old infant at daycare because she didn't have any more maternity coverage and she had to go back to work to feed her child. This is a crime against that mother and that baby. It's a crime. Okay, so that's there. Like my kids did preschool. That's not the healthiest thing. No matter how good the preschool is, that is not the healthiest thing to separate kids from their parents. They're built to be going out to the fields with you and playing around and climbing the tree and picking apples and throwing them down to you while you work. Like whatever, they're built to be swimming in the creek and to be learning from their parents and interacting and being held on and off. And like that's what they're built for. That's optimal. That's normal. I put my kids in preschool because there was no choice. We both work. That's what the system is. The system is a situation where it's like you don't really have much choice. The system has been set up this way. Both parents have to work. Okay. So what are you going to do? You start researching homeschooling and blah, blah, blah. And can I make enough money that my wife doesn't have to work? And if we can't do that in LA, can we move somewhere else? Blah, blah, blah. So humans, especially Americans, are presented with a situation where if you really start paying attention, the amount of fuckery is deafening and overwhelming. Advertising is utterly full of shit. Advertising has gotten to the point where it's just basically an out and out lie. It's nothing but emotional, psychological manipulation. Companies can almost just completely bold-faced lie. The only time the government goes after a company is when there's shitloads of money in it. So they'll go after Apple for antitrust. They'll go after Microsoft for antitrust, like blah, blah, blah. They'll do that because I'm guessing those companies don't bribe them. That's why they go after them. I don't know. And also they can sue them for hundreds of millions of billions of dollars. They're not regulated, like they don't have a problem with the fact that advertising is utterly full of shit, that it's just lies and emotional manipulation, that if you really want to know what a thing is, you have to do a bunch of research and then you have to go find someone who's an expert and say, hey, I love this car commercial. I really love this car. It sounds really good, but what's the actual deal? And they're like, well, to be honest with you, the year before was really good, but with this year, they switched to a different chassis and they started putting the Lexus body on this old chassis that actually isn't very good and it's not luxury and it's the same engine and it has these problems and blah, blah, blah. Because you don't know what a thing is. They're not going to tell you what the thing is. The car company's not going to be like, well, we were doing this straight up totally luxury, but we started struggling with money, blah, blah. So we needed to cut corners. So what we did is we went back to these old tires and this old chassis that's actually the same as some old, Toyota whatever. Like they're not going to tell you. They're just going to sell you the idea of luxury, and you're going to pay a luxury price and you're going to drive something that isn't luxury. Okay. How many examples do you need? Big Pharma just lies. They don't tell you how chemicals actually interact with your brain or your body. They don't tell you, with rare exception, most of these things are not sustainable. And it's not good for you to take them over and over and over for year after year. They don't tell you that. They just sell it to you. They just sell it to doctors. Doctors are not doing the research. They don't know. I am since I took some SSRIs when I was struggling with depression in my late 20s and in my 30s, I was shocked that I could walk into any random MD with no training in psychiatry or psychology. I'm sure they have some exposure. And they were prescribing SSRIs like candy. I could just walk in and be like, yeah, I've been feeling depressed. It's kind of hard, blah, blah. And they'll be like, well, if you want to, I can write you a prescription for Zoloft. Do you think that would be like this dude? There's no shit. This doctor doesn't know if I'm in a toxic work environment. This doctor doesn't know if I was horribly abused for the entirety of my childhood and I have periodic severe depressions and I really need therapy and EMDR therapy or trauma. Like, they don't know. They're just like, well, everyone says give this chemical. So they just give you the frickin' chemical. We need to understand how entirely full of shit the whole thing is. It's all full of shit. None of these people, most of them are not evil, but none of them, they're all operating in a system that was built to be full of shit. It was built to bilk you and to snow you and to psychologically manipulate you. The music you listen to. You can read books on how to craft pop songs so that they're more addictive. Why do you think that there used to be cuts on albums that'd be like, oh my God, that song was like 5 minutes. That song was 6 minutes. Oh, there was like 30 seconds of intro with no vocals, blah, blah, blah. That never happens now. Not because it's better for you or because you hear better music, but because a bunch of people did studies and figured out that it's more addictive when you immediately jump to a vocal, immediately hit a hook, and quickly return to the hook, do a quick bridge just to shake things up and nail that hook again and end it before you're completely satisfied. And then you end up with this earworm in your head and that, blah, blah, I want to hear that song again. I want to hear that. And then you're buying more albums. They don't give a fuck whether you like music or not. They don't even give a fuck whether it's good music. They just know they figured out a way to manipulate your brain and to manipulate your dopamine and manipulate your memory to get more dollars out of your pocket. Like, how many examples do you want me to give? That you can be in denial, or you start trying to address the number of ways that this entire system is gamed to play with your emotions and play with your brain, and not one iota of it, not one bit of it gives a shit whether it's honest with you, genuine with you, whether what it's doing is healthy for you, whether it cares about you, whether it takes hits, and whether it struggles so that you can have something healthier and that you can have a better life. None of it. It's all based on power, money, control, and the ability to manipulate you to make sure that you feel a certain way and you think a certain way. And now we've got cell phones and iPads and screens. I was shocked when just watching TV, when they did that first thing where it's like, oh, they can show a TV show, and a bottom third of the screen is this ticker tape advertising other shows and advertising shit. You're watching a show. You're trying to enjoy watching a show, and either you get distracted and you don't get to enjoy the show that you're watching, or you are being subliminally programmed by those products and by that manipulation. Don't pretend it's something else. Don't pretend that it's something else. That's what it is. Sorry guys, I'm meeting someone, very unprofessional of me, but he's dropping off my bike. He did some work, and mountain biking trumps everything. So what are you gonna do? I'll probably have to interrupt and come back to the point. That was at 9:30. He's probably going to be here any second. How many examples do you want me to give? And so there are people like, oh my God, people make such a big deal out of everything. How are you supposed to live? Like, oh, you sit there and worry. No. You can't. You can't sit there and worry about all of it. you also can't go into denial and pretend it's not true. And so, like the person who doesn't want to address their childhood abuse and the fact that they married someone who's abusive and narcissistic, um, we don't want to admit that this entire system is either intentionally or just by being part of the system, a massive manipulation, and none of it cares about whether your kids are healthy or happy, right? I've talked about this many, many times. I don't feel conflicted because I love being a therapist and I genuinely mean my work and I mean the best for people and I do everything I can that people receive the support and I make space for people to heal. But I'm in an industry that was created by society creating a problem. And our society does this all the time. It's like, oh, what we're going to do is we're going to take away communities. We're going to destroy the ability of people to have time to be with their kids. You're going to need to work, 8 to 12 hours a day. You're going to need to work 60-hour work weeks if you want to get anywhere, if you want to own a home, if you want your kids to have health coverage, if you want to send them to a decent university so that they have a chance, blah, 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 blah. We're going to set up this whole system in which it's impossible to have a healthy family unit that spends much time together. And it's impossible to have aunts and uncles around. It's impossible for families to interact with one another. So then you get this fragmented society and people experience anxiety and depression and blah, blah, blah. And then what we're going to do is we're going to train these specific type of people to be experts at becoming the person that makes you feel like you have a family and makes you feel like someone's listening and makes you feel like you're cared about. Now, I am listening and I do care. And I'm also not unaware that I have been trained and entitled and rewarded to be the solution to a problem that should never have been a problem, and that we need to start talking about why that's a problem in the first place. I make a good living off of the fact that modern society invented a problem, destroyed the family system, and then said, okay, now you need to pay somewhere between $100 to $300 an hour to get caring, intuitive, empathetic support, which again, I genuinely offer and mean to offer. I am not disparaging the fact that it exists. Same thing with daycare and preschool. It exists, and there are teachers who love babies and kids and do their utmost to make it a healthy, loving environment. But let's not pretend that they are not professionals who were trained so that you have to pay to have what should never have been taken away from you. Oh, are we on the same page? Am I out of my mind? I'm not. Okay. I could go on and on and on and on for hours. But there's being in denial, doesn't work. And then there's being aware of the whole thing and spending all of your time trying to eliminate. What I've done for years are like, how do I eliminate toxins in the food? How do I buy the healthiest food? How do I this? How do I do that? How do I make sure that the toxins are out of our soap and out of our dish soap? And my wife spends a lot of time doing that. And how do I make sure that if I'm going to send my kids to preschool, that it's a really healthy one with people with healthy attachment and know how to behave with kids, and that I feel comfortable that my kids are safe? Like, but how do I do all of that shit? Okay, guys. That's the same thing as the client going, how do I take the right number of supplements and get the right personal trainer and do enough yoga that I don't feel as depressed anymore? At some point, you have to go, that's great that you care about yourself and you're working at this, but you're polishing the brass on the Titanic. You have to go deal with the core of what caused this and stop blaming yourself. Stop blaming yourself for what they created or we have created altogether. I don't care about assigning blame, but stop pretending that that is something that you can negotiate with. What are the solutions? What do? you start doubling down on your own autonomy and on your own freedom and on courage and on taking risks to build your own. You move somewhere where there's a community garden and you start learning to garden. And you start learning how to make sure that the soil doesn't get depleted. And you start growing your own food. You can't negotiate with the system. You can't go lobby the government that has sold you out over and over and over again to the highest bidder and say, you guys need to make more rules and more regulation to make sure our food is safe. They're not going to do it. I'm telling you as a therapist who tells people all the time, oh, my mom has acted this way for 30 years and I'm hoping. No, stop hoping. She's not going to change. Your dad's not going to change. If it's toxic for you, stop. Stop negotiating with the toxicity. Make a choice. Reduce the amount of contact. Set some boundaries. Start building your own sense of being and deciding what kind of people you want around you, because that's not going to change. Same thing, American people. Our government is corrupt and toxic and has no care and no interest in how you do. Stop going to them and going, you need to make better rules so that we're protected and that we're no longer preyed upon. They don't care. They've already sold you out multiple times. You can take that history and go, that is what it is. Go build your own community. It might sound hard. It might feel scary. You might feel scared that you don't have a government protecting you and backing you up. In fact, they might even be antagonistic. I mean, look the number of places where like you can't collect rainwater. It's against rules. It's against regulation. They have all these regulations to stop individuals from actually having autonomy and actually taking control over their own life and their own environment and their own food supply. And the government's like, you can't do that. Hey, motherfucker, you didn't watch out for my interests, so fuck off. You did not care for my interests or the interests of my children, so shut the fuck up and back out, because we know who you are now. We're not confused. Okay, I'm going to pause there and I'll finish up when I come back. All right, we are back. I have a really good bike mechanic and he picks up my bike and tunes it up and returns it for a very nominal fee. Man, I've never had my bike. This guy is phenomenal. He's retired and he just does it for people, mostly just sort of to enjoy himself. So I'll be riding on Sunday and I got my Santa Cruz Heckler tuned up and ready to go, baby. All right. So thank you for being patient with my unprofessional on air or on recording checking on my phone, but mountain biking trumps everything except my kids. All right. So I was talking to the government and going, there's a lot of good people who are just caught up in a system. There's people who aren't aware, who still believe. I'm shocked by Tulsi Gabbard. I really believed in her and I really liked the way she talked about government and blah, blah, blah. And her involvement with a very, very corrupt regime. The fact that she hasn't resigned yet and said this is wrong and I stand against it is stunning to me. Maybe she's not a good person. I don't know. But I don't want to get into the politics of it. It's not about, I'm not interested in really creating that level of personal antagonism with someone or criticizing someone personally. I'm here to tell you that you have the situation where humans want things to be simple and they want it to be within their control and they want the solution to be something they can purchase. And Americans tend to really like it when it's a chemical where you can pop it in your mouth, right? and an authority and a professional tells you it's the right thing to do. This is what I'm saying to you. First, I'm saying to the system, we know what you are. You can continue doing what you're doing if you're just doing it out of fear, or you're compulsive, or you're genuinely have shitty intentions and you only care about control and power and money and you don't care who you hurt, like whatever who you are. But what you don't understand is this is now over. Too many people are hip to it. Yes, there are people who are hip to it who can't do anything because they're overwhelmed just trying to financially take care of their families. Yes, there are people who are in denial, but there are so many people who see it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. If I were to let my ego get involved, I will say I've been saying for decades how full of shit the two-party system is in this country, and that it's a false adversarial system. They're all the same people doing the same things. The Democrats have been all in on war and all in on, and the Republicans tax and plunder the economy the same as the Democrats. And then they sit there and accuse one another. Oh, you're going to let these Democrats, they're going to tax you into the ground and take away all your rights and freedoms. And the Republicans are worse. They don't support our rights and freedoms. They have literally been fucking you dry on your rights and freedoms since the first Gulf War and since the Patriot Act. They don't give a shit. They're all about big government. None of them are telling the truth. The Democrats are like, oh, the working class people, they don't give a shit about the working class people. They aren't working class people. They've just learned a shiny thing to say. Right? Just for my ego, I'm saying, I told you so. I've been saying this forever. And everyone was like, well, I just want to throw your vote away and you just be that independent and blah, blah, blah. Hey, dumb shit. Who was throwing their vote away? Anybody participating in that and not calling it out was wasted time and energy and breath and a wasted vote. Because not a one of them is working for your well-being. Not one. They might even sometimes think they are, but they're not. They're all captured. Okay. So you have being in denial, and then you have the overwhelming amount of stimuli that's coming at you to manipulate your brain, to manipulate your emotions, to manipulate your psychology, to give you dopamine hits, to make you feel oxytocin, blah, 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 but not because they want you to be happy, but because it puts you in a vulnerable, open state in which you pay for things and you agree to things that they want. And none of those things are in your benefit. None. So you have this whole complex system gaming you. And we have the human propensity to go, well, I want the cause to be simple and singular and understandable and within my control and preferably in a pill form. And we've just been insisting on either being in denial or believing that. And they just game that and game that and game that to where now people are finally waking up. And I don't know what to do. I'm soft as a kitten. If the entire thing collapsed tomorrow, I don't know how to grow food and hunt and feed my kids. I don't say this from a position of moral superiority. Now, there are people that I've grown up with who have remained capable of building their own deck and doing their own plumbing and hunting and curing food and growing food, who have a right to go, I told you so. All you motherfuckers looked down on us, criticized us, put us down, told us we were not intelligent, projected racism onto us, biases on us. And I'm here to tell you, having grown up in that culture, it's not any more racist or biased than liberal city culture. It's not. Yeah, it's there, and it's more unashamed when it's there, but it's everywhere. Our entire country and culture was born out of mass genocide and slavery. what you like, again, super simple, obvious, screamingly obvious cause that would create a certain type of culture with certain views. And you get white people again, like, well, but it's because of this. Well, if they had more money and blah, 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 anything to go, oh, I'm part of it. And it's this whole thing. And we did it. We did it. We did it. And we operate in it. And we sign off on it. I was remarking about this the other day. I personally can't stand the thing of like, I'm an ally. Go online and post, I have a badge, I'm an ally, I'm an ally. Shut up. I can't speak for black people. I don't know what the fuck they think. But if I was in their position, I'd be like, fuck off. You know who the only ally is? It's not somebody who posts online and like criticizes other white people because they say something that sounds like a microaggression. It's like, why is it for decades and decades, black people, including children, have been assaulted by our police officers, assaulted and beaten and bullied and hurt and harassed, and no white people got between the cop and that victim and said, whoa, 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 what are you doing, man? You know why we didn't do it? Because then we would have got our head cracked and we would have gone to jail. But what's to be done when you've created the problem? You can't just post on social media because that makes you feel good. I have no moral superiority. I haven't. I haven't risked my mind and my body and my emotions to intercede, like mildly. Don't talk about being an ally. It's gross. You're an ally if you are allied, not because you say it. And what that means is there's no way you would have had to bleed and possibly die, because there have been white people who did it and they bled and they died. Right? We're all playing games. We're all playing games with bullshit and refusing to take these screamingly obvious truths, complex but ragingly forceful truths, like a country born in mass genocide and slavery. No, yeah, but you want to talk about it? Like, how long do we want to just keep being idiots? This is silly. I'm not interested in walking around and feel guilty. I'm not interested in beating myself up. I just don't feel like pretending that some blindingly obvious thing that's true isn't true. What's the point? So all of this, right? The system is entirely gamed from beginning to end. What do we do? If you have friends, right? It makes me super happy that I see in some videos that ICE shows up and people of all colors, all ilks just show up and go, not my city. This is our community. This is our community. You get the fuck out. You're not doing it. And when people show up in force, they back off. But they get to bully and hurt people and terrify people and deport people to countries that are not even their country of origin. They get to behave in evil ways when we don't show up. We're going to have to bleed. We're going to have to stand up and say what's true. We're going to have to protect children who are being starved. And we're going to have to stand up and say there isn't anything in your history that justifies what you're doing. You know, one of the biggest challenges being a therapist and working with people with real severe developmental trauma who were badly, badly abused by parents, blah, 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 is the obsession with talking about how bad the parents had it. Amen. There are people who have gone through terrible abuse who don't go on to abuse their kids. We have to stop acting like the fact that somebody had it bad justifies them. There's no Holocaust that justifies what's being done to Palestinian children and people right now. None. You don't need to be political. You don't need to be racial. You don't need to be about religion. Don't be about any of it. It should be stopped. And our system is entirely gamed. What are you going to do? We have to align with what's true. And what's true is, if you have to feed yourself from this industrialized food system, understand what it is and start working on, instead of sitting here pouring all your time and energy into negotiating with something that's entirely full of shit and is not going to change and is not going to listen to your needs, start pouring your time and energy and expertise and intelligence and courage into how can I position myself to raise my own crops so that I know what's going into my kids' stomachs? How can I live my life in a way where I double down on what creates thriving, vibrant health in me and in my family? So here's another thing that I want to tell you. We can all sit here and go on social media and obsess over how negative it is and how incredibly sideways the world is right now and how much sadness there is. And there's a war, there's Russia's aggression against Ukraine and there's Israel's aggression against Palestine and whoever's doing whatever they're doing in Sudan. And there's all of our cell phones using I forget the name of the element that's used in the batteries, in which child slavery is being used in the Congo in order to mine. Like, this stuff is happening right now. We can sit here obsess about it and we can make our little, moral postures on the internet and say, oh, this is horrible and my heart goes out. Like, shut up. Find a way to do something that has some actual impact. So here I want to be kinder and gentler, right? I'm bombastic and I get angry and right? And even that's my error. You know what the most powerful thing that you can do, and nobody really believes it, but the most powerful thing that you can do is to get really, really serious about a deep, beautiful, powerful meditation on love, kindness, and joy, such that you begin to experience it in your body. This is scientifically valid. This is documented. How you maintain the energy of your body and the state of your body doesn't just impact your own health and how you interact with food and how you use your own food and how your own brain works and how resilient you are, but it also begins to propagate out into the quantum field and it raises other people's vibration and energy, and it invites them to also do the same. So this is what I'm talking about when there's a complex or a challenging solution. We don't want to, well, just give me the SSRI. No. Go start a practice. And the reason people start practices and they give it up is because they don't really believe it. They're still convinced by the system that the system can sell you something and you'll get an outcome different than what the system is designed to give you. If I buy the right supplement, right? If I take the right psychotropic medication, if I go to the right doctor, the system will give me something different. It won't. If you're lucky, I had one doctor who was deep, was very honest and very, very well researched and was very helpful and actually addressed diet and said, go read this book and addressed diet. It is an absolute raging, screaming crime that doctors don't regularly talk to you about what you're eating when it is a primary, extremely muscular driver of your health and mental health. And nobody talks about it. It's considered woo-woo that, the nutritionists and like, oh, you go to your, oh, okay, woo-woo. Like, are you fucking a moron? It's a primary driver. They don't not talk about it because it's not a primary driver. They don't talk about it because the system itself has trained them to sell what it wants sold. So you want to know what a primary driver of health and wellness is, and a primary driver of our whole society getting better? Go read Joe Dispenza's book, do some of his meditations, blah, blah, blah. But it's scientifically valid. If you get together with a group of 10 or 15 people and you spend 6 months meditating on kindness and love, and you begin to feel it and embody it in your body, you create an energetic field that then multiplies with the other people doing it with you. And if you imagine the entire world, if we do this, and I think I'm going to do it, right? If we start imagining and meditating on both the Israelis and the Palestinians, we don't get to demonize anyone, and start imagining love and healing and forgiveness and kindness and safety, other things happen. Me going on the internet and expressing outrage over what's happening contributes to more agitation and more fight or flight. Well, that's what they're operating already. How am I helping? A primary driver, scientifically documented. Start training yourself to meditate on kindness, love, and gratitude and care for all living things, and embody it. Feel it in your body, feel it in your heart space, and begin to imagine it radiating out, and then start doing it with friends, and then start doing it with the whole groups, and then aim it and give it and allow the energy to encompass those people suffering the most horribly and the people inflicting the suffering, because they need it too. We don't get to demonize people. You cannot create this state that's so impactful and demonize anyone. You cannot create this state in your body while demonizing anyone. It's incompatible. The second you start demonizing, the state turns off, and you no longer have the impact. Do you care that children are starving or being tortured and killed? Do you care that there are nations in massive suffering? Russia, Ukraine, you think Russia's not suffering with what Putin is shoving through? Do you care? Are we just going to make a social post? Or do you actually care? And are we willing to put aside our silly, unconscious bias that the answer must be simple, it must be understandable, it must be for sale, and preferably in a pill form? Can we please could you just throw that the fuck out, please? There is a solution that has been documented multiple times for decades and decades and decades now, and people knew this 2,000-3,000 years ago. It's not new, it's not weird, it's that if you establish a practice of meditation and insist to yourself that you let the world do what it's doing, but that what you're going to do with your inner space is engender and imagine and envision and vibrate with joy and love and peace. And I'll let other people who are experts go into why that works and how it works and what the energetic field is and blah, blah, blah. But it is documented. And all we have to do is do it. And it starts changing things. Most importantly for you, immediately, health outcomes, mental health outcomes, strength of relationships, clarity of choices in career, of choices in romantic partners or not romantic partners, clarity of choices in friends, clarity of being, clarity of what you should or should not do in a given situation. In a very bewildering world, it stops being bewildering. It's like, does this align with love and joy and peace? And am I able to continue to emote this? If no, that's not for me. Where do I find it? Can we do this? The answer is singular. It's not simple. It's not necessarily easy, but it's local. All the other stuff, figure out how to garden. Figure out how to garden. Figure out how to live in a place that doesn't regulate you into the ground and tax you for where you park and tax you for driving and tax you for buying gas and tax you on owning a home and tax you on owning land and tax you every time a dollar moves. Like, leave it. Stop negotiating with the system. Leave it. And don't be afraid that you're going to be alone, because more and more people, you're the leader. If you see it now, you'll be lonely at first, but this is going to happen en masse. It's going to happen en masse. And you're going to be joined. There's going to be community after community living, supporting one another. Parents no longer having to hand off a 4-month-old baby to strangers to be at a daycare for 8 hours. This is a crime. This is going to happen. Can we do this? We can. I'm going to do it. There is no other way. There is no other solution. How many thousands of years of evidence do we need to understand that that other system doesn't work? It keeps showing up to prove it to us. That other system is like, okay, you still believe in me? Well, here I go. I'm just going to show up and torture you and starve you and cause war and famine and suffering until you figure out that stop doing it. Stop negotiating with it. Stop talking about it. Stop thinking about it. Stop participating in it and begin inventing things that are primary. Can I grow healthy food? Can I be in a community? Can I love my community? Can I be loved by my community? Can I meditate on that? Can I meditate? Just start by meditating on that. Maybe start with Joe Dispenza. All right, you guys. I'm going to close there. I've got incoming at 11. I love you guys. Talk to you next time. Take care.
Just for today, everything's okay. Everything's okay.